So I'm really delighted to welcome Jayne and Vicki from the Charity Retail Consultancy. They're one of our long-standing corporate members, and they are also the new sponsors of the QMA. So hopefully you either take part or are interested in taking part in the QMA, which is why you wanted to come along to the webinar today. So hopefully between the two of them, they're going to unpick the kind of importance of that, the importance of the research and data that you can get from it, and why it really is a valuable tool for all of our members. So ladies, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Julia, and morning, everybody. It's great to have you with us. And just to start with a little bit of an apology for the fact that we had to postpone last time. I wasn't well that time. I've now got a cough and a cold, so excuse me if I have to mute myself and cough a little bit during the session, but hopefully we'll be good to go. So just to start then, I'm just going to, sorry, I just need to move my screen a little bit. Apologies. I can't see my moving on slides. Anyway, that's better. So just to start, my name is Vicki Burnett from the Charity Retail Consultancy. I've worked in charity retail a very long time. I was thinking about it. I put nearly 30 years and then thought, no, it's 40. So I started as a volunteer at St Luke's in Sheffield when I was 15. And as you can see, I've been in the sector ever since. And I'm currently an Oxfam volunteer too. So we work with charities, hundreds of charities, and support them with all aspects of their charity retail offer. So we do reviews, we do feasibility studies, we might deep dive into particular areas such as volunteering or e-commerce or logistics. But whichever piece of work that we're doing, we always use data to inform our work, which is why we wanted to sponsor the research programme, because we really see the value of it. So I'm just going to pass over to Jayne, who's going to introduce herself too.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Jayne Cartwright, also from the Charity Retail Consultancy. And I've worked in charity retail since I was 21, not 15, and that is less than 40 years. However, just for full transparency, I am actually a little bit older than Vicki here, so I don't want her to feel bad about that. So my journey has been quite similar to Vicki's. I started at 21 as an Oxfam shop manager, became district manager, worked for other national charities, head of retail at Save the Children, and then set up the consultancy back in 2010, when I then became a trustee for 6 years at Clare House Children's Hospice up here in the northwest of England. And so, as I say, since then, I have worked exclusively within our brilliant little business, the Charity Retail Consultancy. So we do an awful lot of things. Vicki's going to move on to the next slide, and then we can see some of what that's about. And so, as you can see, we've won the brilliant Charity Retail Association Supplier of the Year 3 times, and we are really, really proud of that. It honestly means the world to us, because we care so much for this sector. We will do whatever we can to support it and to support you. And continue to do that with our growing team. So I'm not going to go into all of these details, but if there's any project, large or small, that we might be able to help you with, then do get in touch with us. So we've got the consultancy, and then in partnership with the CRA, we run Charity Retail Learning, which we set up in the pandemic, when all our business just suddenly disappeared overnight. And we knew that shops, shop managers, shop staff could still do training when they were furloughed. So we set up a few PowerPoint courses. They were really popular, and we now have over 40 courses. And we have charities all over the world who come to us. And we're really proud that we have brilliant feedback on the courses, and that's partly because the wonderful team at the CRA check every course in detail and dot every I and cross every T to make sure that the quality is there. So you can have subscriptions at really affordable costs, which makes sure that your team are fully skilled in every aspect of the charity retail operation. We can tell you all about that later if you wish. And we're really proud that this year we are sponsoring the QMA. for the CRA, which we feel is it's a big deal for us, and we really have always, as charity retailers ourselves, valued the data that brings for ourselves as individuals, for our teams, for our wider organisations, and so it felt right to us to be able to support the CRA with that. And you'll see our little advert on the back of the QMA throughout this year. So that's a little bit about what we do, but you've not come to hear about that particularly. But we're very pleased to have the opportunity to see you here. And I'm now passing you back to Vicki, who's going to begin the presentation properly.
Thank you, Jane. So just before we sort of launch into it properly, as Julia said, we'd like to just run a quick poll, really, just to get a sense of the people here about who actually submits data to this QMA and who actually reads the QMA already. So Julia, if you're able to launch that poll for us, please, that would be great. So if you could quickly answer those two questions, and then we can have a little look, see where we're at. And Julia, I will leave it to you to decide when that needs to be closed, because I think you can see how many people have answered.
Yep, so most people have answered. We're at 86%,
Okay.
which is fantastic. So I'll give you a couple more seconds for anybody that hasn't answered, if you're able to, because I know sometimes if you're joining on your phone or through a different method, that it can be harder to see the poll when it launches. Okay, I think we're about there. Let's have a look. Here are the results.
Right, so we've got 33% do submit regularly to the QMA. Thank you to all. And 67 don't yet. So you're all hopefully on our list to get you submitting your data to. And then conversely, totally the opposite way around. So 67% of you use that data and 33% of you don't. So that's really interesting to see that kind of swapped around. So thank you for that, Julia. If you want to close that down, that's great. So what we're going to talk about today, these are the things we're going to cover, is why should we use data? What's the point of it all in the first place? What can we learn specifically from the QMA? Really importantly, how can we use that insight to drive our business forward? Because that's what this is all about. It's about improving our businesses, and so that we can raise more money for our charities. And then in the context of, obviously I've been a head of retail. I understand how busy it gets and how easy it is for stuff to be deprioritized. So I wanted to put some tips and tricks to make completing and tracking that data simple. So make it as kind of time efficient as possible, and to give you the most opportunity to do that. And obviously, as Julia said, there's time for Q&A at the end. So starting then, why use data? And I think clearly this is about business more clearly and precisely. And obviously we all have data in our till systems, and I know we've got a real range of charities here today, so we'll have a whole range of different sort of operations and till systems and ways of tracking it. But it really helps if you're working with your data on a regular basis, and just the mere sort of act of submitting that data, it helps you really get to know that data, understand it better, and use it to kind of make informed decisions. Now, we all work a little bit on gut instinct, I think, as well, and that can be a really valuable part of our decision-making process. But data and insight is so vital to help us be informed in the choices that we make. But then the other thing that that data gives us, and particularly the QMA, is that opportunity to benchmark, which is valuable. And I remember when I was head of retail at St Gemma's, looking at a shop that was performing, we thought, well, and then actually when somebody else came along, it did. We changed shop manager and it did much better. And that's sort of almost what you can find from your benchmarking. You might think, oh, I'm doing great, but actually, if you benchmark, you might see actually that other areas, some people are overperforming against what you're doing, or conversely, you might be overperforming in other areas where other people are struggling. So it's a really interesting way of kind of assessing your performance against the broader picture. And it is a great tool for internal reporting. So being able to kind of pass that on to other people within your organization. Quite often, you know, internal engagement can be quite tricky. So with retail, so it's really good to be able to share information and help people understand what retail is doing and how your retail operation looks compared to the broader sector. And we'll talk quite a lot about that through the whole session. It helps you better understand market trends so you can see what's coming. And I think when I was at St Gemma's, I joined the board at the CRA, and that was a great opportunity for me. And it changed my whole way of working, because it made me look up and look out and think about what's going on and what are Oxfam doing, what's British Art Foundation, what are the other hospices doing. So having this sort of understanding of trends, and the data provides us with that sort of longevity, as well as kind of some qualitative research and things that feelings that people are having, or actions that people are taking. It can really help show what those trends are, so that you can make sure that you're at the forefront of that, or that you're choosing trends and a direction that suits your organisation. See where to place your focus for improvement. So as I was saying, you might look at your data, benchmark against the QMA, and say, actually, you know, we've got a really fantastic average transaction value. That's great. That's working really well for us. But what we can see is actually our average transaction numbers are really low, so compared to everybody else. So actually, if we know we've got a good value, but if we can push the footfall up and really get more people through the door, then that's really going to help us fly. So it can really sort of start to kind of operationally guide you in terms of how you move things forward. And it also gives you that opportunity to track your performance over time. And my old boss used to say, you know, end of a budget year, everything's back to zero. We all start again, you know, and we're back on sort of off on a new journey. But we can't forget where we've been, and tracking and been regularly submitting your data to the QMA means that you have that gift of being able to track your performance and see how you've done and see what has influenced your performance. So just to sort of introduce the QMA, obviously some of you say that you know 60%, 7% of you obviously have seen it, and some of you, a third of you also kind of submit. But just to kind of give you a little bit of an introduction to it, it's on the research section of the CRA website. You need to log in using your CRA login. If you personally don't have one, because obviously sometimes it's an individual in an organisation who has the login and not everybody has it. So if you don't have a CRA login, please, you know, just get in touch with Alex. I'm sure he'll supply you with one. Go to the research section, and it sits in there along with all of the other research that the CRA done, which is equally valuable. There is a the quarterly market analysis has submission dates in January, April, July and October, and then is published the following month. So we've just had the Q3 from which is the latest one, which there's a link there to it. I won't take you on there, but I've dotted bits and pieces of it throughout the presentation. But what I would suggest is that you log those dates in your calendar, so that you know that it's time to submit and it's time to read the publication. And obviously the CRA send out reminders of that through their newsletters and things. So again, if you're not signed up for a CRA newsletter, please do make sure you've got your name on the list, so that you can see these things coming through. One of the things that the QMA does is it cuts up the data according to charity size, so that you're comparing like with like. So if, for example, you're a hospice, your data will appear in the hospice set, because hospices traditionally sort of overperform the sector, and as there is such a big part of the CRA membership, it's good to look at them all together. But equally, if you're a hospice with, say, 9 shops, your data would appear in the hospice line, but also in the very small charity line as well. And what that does, by divvying it up and cutting it up between those different organisation sizes, you can compare your organisation, your retail operation, with ones of similar sizes, and you can also see what's happening sort of, you know, if you're thinking about an expansion programme and you want to kind of really move up, you can see how the next one up from you is performing and see ways that you want to occupy. And that cutting that data by chain size happens all the way through the report. So what can we learn from the QMA? Well, it starts off always with a kind of a headline, so a market analysis, key takeaways and summaries. And this is the sort of first line of the latest one: is in-store income was steady. Like-for-like in-store income declined by 0.3% year on year, so pretty stable. So that opens it. It shares the headlines that provide a snapshot, and it helps us really quickly see how things are looking. So like I say, for example, this one, it says, sales are stable, online is strong, donation volumes are up, quality's down, and perhaps that contributes to a fall in the ATV. But also lower ag prices might be impacting this as we sell off those lower price goods that have previously been ragged. So this is like a really quick sense check. So does it feel like it reflects your organisation? To me, that's the summary of the seeing market currently. And then you can look at sort of, it shares some sort of general figures. So top line stuff around gift aid conversion, rag price, average transaction value, average transaction numbers, things like that. So it's a really good sort of top line takeaway. And that's a really good thing to share with perhaps your leadership team, your trustees, just to give them an idea about kind of what the sector's looking like. And it's a quick read, easy to take in. There's also a commentary from the researchers, so a bit of a summary of what's happened and what the data's showing. So that's the quantitative and the qualitative. So things like this one, it's saying the final quarter of the 2024 charity retail sector's capacity for innovation amid challenging conditions. So there's lots of talk on this one about obviously about rag price and about what people are trying to do to kind of deal with the fact that recycling income is very poor. So the other thing that this one shows is about Christmas. So it asks about Christmas 2024. So there's a whole summary of information from people about how their Christmas was, how things went in terms of retail sales, but also Christmas cards. So that's really great information to be able to kind of gather and think about when planning for Christmas next year. So there's that sort of qualitative feedback. So it gives an opportunity each time to say, what are your challenges, what are your successes, and what are your initiatives to boost income? And that's a really great way to see what other people are experiencing and considering. So, and also to kind of take those great ideas and try out in your shop. So it says things like, so here we can say the level of donations throughout the period has been high, the quality a little off in some cases, but still mostly saleable. And that's from a hospice. So you can see the kind of things that different size organisations are experiencing. And you can see whether, things that might work for you or might work for, might work in a little organisation or might work in a larger one. And you can learn from the successes of people who are the same as you or different to you. And again, in this one, there was lots of stuff about kilo sales and people saying, okay, so in order to try and get rid of our excess stock, because we can't get good money from the recyclers, we're trying kilo sales, we're trying jumble sales, we're trying pop-ups and things like this. So there's lots of kind of information in there that is helpful. And then, as we sort of go deeper into the QMA, is about the charity retail estate. And this really helps to understand the appetite for growth or otherwise. So again, it's drilled down by chain size and also by the type of store. So example, in the last report that we've got, we could see that it sort of breaks it down into special, so general stores, bookshops, furniture, superstores, and then there's also other specialist shops. And we can see in the latest QMA, for example, that superstores and other specialist shops are driving the growth, and that's where the openings are coming. And it's interesting that other category is undefined, but I wonder whether that's that sort of Gen Z type shop that we're seeing lots more shops opening that are kind of very sort of Gen Z focused. So whether that's sort of sitting in there as well. And also we saw, for example, a slight drop in shop numbers from the larger charities, which is a change from the last QMA. So this section really helps us to understand how optimistic charities are feeling, if they're still planning to invest in growing in their operation. It highlights the trends in the sector, so we can see that we know superstores are something that people are invested in. And then it helps you to then think about your offer and what you're doing. So if that's not something that you've been considering, or if it was something you're considering, you feel like, oh, right, okay, there's a bit of a, critical mass happening here. I can see people are doing it. They've been doing it. They've been opening superstores for the last 4 QMAs. I've seen that grow. That feels like a space we'd like to occupy. And then that's data that you can then use to support your business case when putting that forward to your leadership team and your decision makers. So in terms of the main bulk of the report, of course, it focuses on income, which is great. So it gives us an overall picture of the sector, both as a snapshot, so what's happened in this last quarter, but also like for like. And in some of the like for like data, what's really important is that the CRA use the same charities as the sample to measure like for like. So obviously there are going to be different people, submitting data each time. But what they'll say is, okay, so this group of charities have submitted data last time and this time, they're in common, so we'll compare those figures so that they're not comparing, an apple with an orange. So there's really sort of good integrity in the data. So in terms of income, you can see it in several ways. So there's the total retail income, which includes in-store and online. And then that separates out as well. So it can look at in-store income only, which includes things like gift aid and donations. There's this great table, which is like weekly income per shop per week, which I think is a really helpful tool. So for me, this is great data to be sharing with your shop teams. This is a language that shop teams understand. Most people will be working on a weekly budget, so they can see, they know what their target is. So to share that with your shop managers and say, actually, look, this is what, hospices are on average taking £3,276 a week. Our weekly average or our weekly median is more than that, less than that, and then we can start to have a conversation about how that impacts and is there any action that we need to take in order to be benchmarking better. So it's a really good sort of snapshot to share with teams and get people really thinking about that. The other thing just to note is that there is the average and the median on here. So sometimes the median is a more valuable figure because it sort of takes out those, you might in your chain have some one or two shops that are really punching above the weight, really taking some sort of big money, but then everybody else sort of sits sort of a little bit in the middle, and then there are some that are much smaller shops or low performing shops, but they're in there and the value, and the median sort of allows for that and takes those out of the average figure. So sometimes choosing the median over the average can be helpful. The other things that the survey shows is average transaction numbers and average transaction value, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. It also breaks down weekly sales. I'll just move on to this slide so you can see that. So average weekly sales per general shop by type of donated goods, which is great. And again, something that shop teams hopefully are looking at this all of the time, so they understand like where is the money coming from in their business, how do they make sure that their shop floor and their activities reflect where the money is going to be coming from. And you can see about whether you're performing in line with the sector, below it or above it. And also on a shop by shop basis, you might say, well, actually, we've got this shop and their music and video is way overperforming against the sector. What are they doing? What's that happening in that shop? Can we replicate that elsewhere? Can we bring it across the whole chain? Do we need to focus that shop onto that particular product type? So it starts to kind of get us thinking about all those different kind of excuse me, options and opportunities. Just going back to that last slide again. The other thing that the QMA talks about is online performance at e-commerce, and that's really been a very interesting journey, e-commerce actually. And we tracked that through the QMA. Obviously, there was a huge increase in it throughout the pandemic and beyond. It settled down a bit, and then recently it's gone back up again. Whether that's been impacted by the weather, we're not sure. But it's also really interesting because sometimes online is the thing that people think is like the panacea. It's going to be the thing that everybody can do, and it's flying and all these kind of things. But actually, what the QMA does show is the proportion from online is still a really small percentage of overall income from charity retail. So it can help sort of to give a bit of perspective, and particularly to those who might not understand the market as well. So trustees or senior managers who are not part of retail can get a much more kind of clear picture of what's going on in the sector. And the other thing, which is really important at the moment, is it gives information about collections and about sort of recycling income. And so, excuse me, this obviously is a real sort of thing, key thing for the sector at the minute, and that again breaks that down regionally, so you can see whether you are getting, you know, a similar figure to for your recycling as other people within your region or in the different regions in which you're operating. Now, this is just an example for you, really. And I think one of the things about the QMA is about sharing it and about making sure that that data goes out more broadly. So this is an example of something that we share with our client. So if one of the things that we are looking at is a bit of a market summary, we always go to the QMA and we'll pull out the relevant data. And this is really just to kind of help you think about if you want to share stuff with your leadership team, with your trustees, a little sort of format, a sort of dashboard, if you like, that can give you a bit of an overview. So this is obviously one that we've done for hospice. So it focuses us on hospice chains. And it gives a bit of a kind of an overview, so you can look at the whole sector, and obviously with a little bit of commentary as well. So your insight and your context is helpful to add to this. We'll share these slides afterwards, so you know, feel free to use these if you wish. And similarly, this is one that we do around retail estates, about growth and about or otherwise in terms of the number of charity shops, and also just about future plans, about what people are thinking about doing. And again, this is something that can be really helpful just to kind of get your board or your decision makers thinking about kind of, okay, where's the world at? What do we need to do? You know, are we comfortable with or holding off, or you know, segmenting a bit more clearly, or whatever. It gives that context and that framework. So that's all well and good, but how do we then take all of that information from the QMA and use it to drive our business forward? One of the things that I feel like is that when I was head of retail at St Gemma's, and all my retail jobs, it's a very busy job. There are lots and lots of different hats to wear. You're always, you know, got lots of different priorities kind of forcing in. It can be really hard to look up and out, and to, you know, you get very focused on what you're doing and how you're looking. But in order to really understand what good looks like, to be able to learn from others and to really understand how your performance looks against the wider world, it is vital to look up. For me, I joined the board at the CRA many years ago. It was a game changer, because suddenly it was like, there's all this set I can learn from. And the QMA is a really fantastic resource for that. It's brilliant. We chatted to a few people when we were looking at doing this session, and I thought this was a really great quote from a head of retail from a national charity that has 43 shops, and we were sort of saying, what do you get from the QMA? What is it for you? And so this was great, finding it helpful for building a foundation of ideas, especially for business cases, as we've said, you know, so backing up a business case, so saying, oh, actually, we would like to invest in superstores, here's what the market is doing, or like comparing financially. A go-to resource for setting targets and boundaries. So, you know, when you're budgeting, or when you're thinking of trade, or, you know, thinking about average transaction values, KPIs, things like that, it's a really great place to go to find out what other people are doing, how it looks. And benchmarks like average transaction value, the collection monies, and online income are particularly useful. So things that all really sort of key tools in managing a chain. Excuse me. So thinking about then how we use the data to drive the business forward. The first thing is that if you are regularly filling out the QMA, so you're doing it quarterly, you have all your own data to hand. So you are working with that data and you are pulling it together in a way that gives you your own information at your fingertips. And then you can compare that directly with what the results are for the whole of the sector. So you're comparing the same day. I was chatting to Julia earlier about this. I think when you fill out your form, it's an online form, you press submit, and then that's gone. So what you need to make sure is that when you fill out your QMA data, that you keep a record of what you're saying, whether you just photograph the screen before you send it off, or you transfer it onto a spreadsheet or something like that. But make sure that you hold on to your data for each QMA, so that you've got, you're able to directly compare your information with what comes out in the results. So you can then look at, like, where are you exceeding? Like, what has driven that? Really starting to think about what is it that's made us do better in our furniture stores than other people seem to be doing? Or what is it that's making us get a better rag price or a worse rag price than everybody else? Think about what's driving that, and can you do more of it? Is that something that's just a one-off thing in a couple of shops, or is that across the chain? Looking at, of course, where are you falling behind? Is there something that really stands out that could be a new area of focus? So, for example, you might say, actually, what we want to do is we want to increase our average transaction value. We want to do some more upselling at the till. We're going to work with our team and train them and make sure that they're comfortable chatting to customers and helping them to make more purchases so that our average transaction value goes up. Or you might think, actually, I'm just going to let's try increasing our average price. And you might want to do that in a test and learn kind of way. So rather than going wholesale across your whole chain, you might say, right, I'm going to try that in a couple of shops, see how that goes. And then if that feels like that's working, we can move on and we can roll that out across the piece. Look for trends and copy ideas. So, there's so much information in there. Like I say, one of the things I love so much about charity retail is that we share. I was doing a piece of work for a client in Ireland the other week, and the heads of retail Irish were very happy to chat to me about all of the things that they're doing, how they're working, what's working for them, what they think of the market. It's fantastic. And the CRA is absolutely key to that. I think that they have brought us together as a sector in a way that makes us all happy to share, and we all want the most for everybody. So fantastically, the QMA does that every quarter. There's information in there for people saying, I've done this, I've tried that, that really worked, this has been really hard. And that's a sort of introduction to those kind of trends and those ideas. And you can then follow that up. So there is the knowledge exchange on the CRA website. So if there's something that sparked your interest, you might want to go on there and say, I saw this in the QMA. Has anybody else tried this? Great to hear a bit more information. You can go to the network meetings that the CRA holds. So, marketing, people, gift aid and stock. There's all sorts of different small charities, networking, all free, all part of your membership. Make the most of it. You are paying to be a member of the CRA. Take full advantage of all of the fantastic services they've got on offer. And you can reach out to fellow members. So use the QMA to spark your imagination and then dive deeper by networking with fellow members. And I think then other thing, a sort of thing looking internally, that whole sharing that information is really important. And I think I mentioned earlier, internal engagement can sometimes be a real challenge for retail, particularly in organisations like hospices, where the only non-site, the only sort of teams that aren't based on site are the shops, and you're away, and everybody's got a different culture and different ideas and all these kind of things. So internal engagement for me is a really key thing, and sharing information and sharing data is a great way of helping people in your organisation more broadly understand what your world is about and how important it is, and the successes and the challenges that you're facing. So really, there's lots of different places that you can share this information. So like I say, with your board, you can do some top level figures, help them understand how you benchmark. And like I say, use your data against the CRA, the QMA results, so that they can see where you sit. And use that as something to inform your business proposals, your business planning, your budgeting, all of that kind of thing. But also, I think, really think about, the shop teams, area teams. So make sure that this data is something that everybody is used to looking at, used to talking about and sharing. So you might want to say every quarter, you're going to have a Teams or a Zoom briefing talking about the QMA results, seeing what that means for you as an area team or as a shop team, and really start getting people thinking about the broader sector. For shop managers or shop teams, it's great information. And it can help them really sort of think about saying, well, your average transaction value is a bit less than others. Why don't you walk up and down your high street and have a look at the other shops, see what's going on the high street? Why do you think more people might be going into the charity shop up the road than coming in ours? And really starting to get people thinking like that, like I keep saying, up and out, look and see what's going on. So it's a great opportunity, and also a really great way to motivate people when you benchmark well. If you're doing really well, thing to say with people. So I would say build it into your sort of annual meetings. You know when those surveys are coming out. Put them on the agenda and make sure it's something that you're discussing with the whole team. So finally, really, is just thinking about sort of tips and tricks, really. So to make things as easy as possible, because it is hard. It's hard to prioritize. There's a million things going on. It's raining, the roofs are leaking, your rag price has fallen off a cliff. There's all sorts of stuff going on, people ringing you, there's all sorts of things going on. It's very hard to find that time. So what I would say is but it is so important, and the more you use it, the more valuable it will be to you, and the more you'll want to invest in it. So the more members that we get filling out the QMA, the better that data will be for you as well as for everybody else. So the whole sector will benefit, and when the sector benefits, all our charities benefit and society benefits. So don't underestimate the impact that these kind of things have. So I think the key thing is really is set up your own data capture and reporting to try to mirror the QMA questions. So it might be, for example, that there are certain things that your EPOS provider can provide with you in a report that absolutely summarises the information that you're needing to submit to the QMA. So I would say, if you don't know whether you've got that now, talk to your EPOS provider. There's a handful of them who support most of the sector. So if everybody's asking for the same thing, I'm sure that they will be happy to support with some new reporting. So that's one way of doing it. The other thing you can do is have a spreadsheet or set up your own reporting systems internally to try to mirror that. So it's not like having to sort of scratch around for data every single quarter. You know what you need to provide. How do you make sure that that's there being fed through to you so that it's easy for you to submit? And like I said, keep a track of your own data. Make sure that you hold on to that. A key thing is make it somebody's job. Give it to somebody. So whether it's you, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's somebody in your team, whether it's somebody in your admin team, make it part of somebody's job. So if I give you any action today, is go and think who's going to fill out the QMA in future. Let's make it this person. Like when I was at St Gemma's, we were really fortunate. We had a great volunteer who was ex-banking. And so he knew his way around figures, he knew his way around a spreadsheet, and he basically used to do all of our surveys for us every quarter, and then he'd pass that to me. I'd have my commentary, and then it would go off. So it was a really great little system. It's also something that it can be a home-based role, which perhaps gives greater inclusivity. So people who might not be able to come into an office or volunteer in a shop because of a disability or anything like that, might be able to, this is a role that they may be able to take on. So there's all sorts of great aspects of involving somebody in doing that. And then what I would say as well is set up like a spreadsheet or something that can track and compare your performance. So something that you're filling out. So on a quarterly basis, so you can see how things progress. So I've just done a little tiny, very simple spreadsheet, which is basically tracking average transaction numbers and average transaction value. So you can see you've got the QMA data on one side, we've got my charity on the next side, and you can see we started off strong. We dropped, but we know that was because we were shutting 2 stores for a couple of half days because we knew we had volunteer shortages. What I'm doing is I'm directly seeing the impact of those closures there, and what I want to do is recruit more volunteers. So we then went on to have a volunteer recruitment campaign, and we got a few more in, and things started to recover. But we still felt that we weren't getting the footfall that we'd had previously. Can you see we were at 64 rather than 70 for the ATN? So what we did is a social media push to drive that footfall to get more people through the shop door, which seems to have worked because it's now gone up to 77. And also we then did a price review and we rounded everything up to 95p. So we didn't have 25p's and 45p's anymore. And that's made a difference in terms of our average transaction value. So if you've got that data, then you're tracking that. You can see your journey. You can see the things that have influenced it positively and negatively, and how you benchmark against the sector. So just a few sort of key takeaways then, really, before we open up for questions, is data is, vital to fully understand your business. This is one of the very, very key tools that you need to understand your business and to be able to be successful. taking part means the data is more meaningful and robust for all. So to the 67% of you who aren't regularly filling out the QMA, I implore that you do. It's a great resource, and if your data's in there, it's more meaningful, not just for everybody, but also for you. So take that time and make sure that you commit to it, and submit the data every quarter. Set up those simple systems to capture and track that data versus your own. Don't miss that opportunity to be able to look on an ongoing basis about how you're doing versus how the sector is doing, so that you can look back and you can share that with your wider team, and just always keep talking. Use that data as widely as you can. Think about the different audiences that you have within your retail and within your organization, and who would like to see what's important for people, what will help you to be able to share that information, to be able to help build understanding, and to be able to sort of drive performance. So that's all from me, but really happy to take questions from anybody.
So, Vicki, thanks very much. That was great. And your Wi-Fi managed to get us through, and your voice and your throat and everything. So that was great. A question came in from Neil earlier saying, do we know the exact dates for comparison purposes? For instance, is it the 1st of January to the 31st of March? Yes, it is. That's right, isn't it, Julia?
Yeah, so depending on what period we're listing, so if it's like October to December, it's the very first of the first month right to the very last day of the last month, which means we then can directly compare year on year. So, the QMA that was published this week is covering the 1st of October to the 31st of March. So it's exactly the same time period every single year. It's not broken down by weeks or anything. So then it's really easy for you guys to start doing like-for-like comparisons. So yes, somebody's put in the chat, Vicki, could you go back to one of the slide which has the kind of months up? I mean, we will send it to everybody, but I think someone's thinking, oh, I'm quite keen, but I need to know. So for example, the QMA that was just published, it's the time period, the 1st of October to the 31st of December. Perfect, Vicki. You then publish or submit your data in January, and then we publish in February. And that pattern replicates then throughout the year. And there are specific dates that you can download. And when we send this out, I will send everybody a copy of the full research programme. And there is a table on the members area which actually gives the very specific submission dates. So there are very clear submission dates that you need to submit by. So, the next QMA is available from the 31st of March, but the submission deadline is the 25th of April. And all of that is available. And you can see the submission deadlines right through until the end of this year. So we do give as much notice as possible. We're not kind of saying, by the way, next week is the deadline, can you submit some data? You can literally go and track, as Vicki said earlier in her presentation, get that table and then put into your calendar, this is when the survey date opens, this is when the survey date closes, so you know what your time window is, and you can do that right through 2025. So it's not kind of short notice or catching anybody unawares. Okay, let's see. That's the only question that's come through. But one of the things I just wanted to mention is that there are also parts of the QMA where we are also referencing data from the British Retail Consortium. So, we are conscious that, especially Vicki talked an awful lot about the trend analysis piece, that some of these trends will be coming from commercial retail as well. So it's really important to find out what's happening in the charity retail sector and then contextualizing that within the wider retail sector. So in the most recent QMA, you'll see that Helen Dickinson, who is the chief executive from the British Retail Consortium, there's a quote in from her about the poor performance of commercial retail in general in this quarter. There wasn't that massive uplift that normally happens in December, and food sales were especially hit. So it might be that if, for example, you have got some of your estate on retail parks where there might be the Marks and Spencers, the Audis, the Tesco's of the world, that when you're noticing a bigger trend within retail is that food retail particularly underperformed in the last quarter, that might go part of the way to explain why perhaps your estate that was in similar types of locations could also have slightly underperformed compared to other parts of the estate. And that kind of helps to give some more context as well. And we also use the British Retail Consortium footfall tracker as well. So you can see that actually footfall wasn't as high as was expected in this quarter. So then that really helps to contextualize for you guys that not only is your shop in Enfield High Street, I live in Enfield, not only is the shop manager saying, oh, the footfall's been really terrible, but actually you've got data from the CRA, but also from the British Retail Consortium that is backing up to show actually footfall really has been quite poor over the last quarter. And that might go some way to explain some of the results that you're seeing. So hopefully that's another incentive that we do try to, as Vicki says, that looking up piece, looking up within our own sector is really important, but looking up and looking around within the wider retail sector is also really important to kind of help contextualize kind of what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. And I would just put this slide back up because this has got the British Retail, the vacancy monitor data in here, which is reference. This is an older QMA, but at the top, obviously, of that, the data sources are listed and the sample sizes. And I think if you are sharing data as well, it's really important to always acknowledge where that data's come from and what the sample size looks like. So that's just something else to think about too.